All right, let's get you going on the blood here. Uh, Here are the major parts of it. Now, blood consists of the formed elements, and there's three of them: the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. And then the plasma, that is the fluid that carries these elements in it. When you think about what is blood, what type of tissue, it is a connective tissue, which are cells, living cells, in an acellular or a non-living matrix. Acellular means non-cellular, and also. So you have the erythrocytes, leukocytes, and platelets. Those are your cellular components. And then you have the plasma. That's the fluid. When you take blood and you spin it down in a centrifuge, you produce what's known as a hematocrit. And when you do that, you'll get a little tube, a little glass tube, little wax plug in the bottom. You'll spin it, and the red blood cells will concentrate near the bottom, and then the plasma will be near the top, and then you'll have a thin little layer between the two, and that's where you would look to find the leukocytes, the white blood cells, and the platelets. So the bottom part, the packed red blood cells, if you will, that is your actual hematocrit. And when you take that tube's volume and you figure it into percentages, on an average, normal, healthy adult human, that should have a value of 45. So if a person asks you what is a normal hematocrit, your answer should be 45. When you think about what blood and how it should appear, when it's oxygenated, it has a color. When it's deoxygenated, it has a color. If you were to drop it into water, it should sink. It's more dense. And the pH range is always 7.4 is what you want it to be. It's going to carry the heat of the body, so it's a little bit warmer. And you can see there the values of a male having a little bit more than a female. That's usually probably because of the more musculature of the male due to the hormone testosterone. It carries nutrients, it carries oxygen, it carries waste. It also moves, or it's a transport medium for the hormones, It helps maintain your body's normal pH. It does this with blood proteins, albumin, that's found in the plasma, and bicarbonate, which is a byproduct, if you think about it, of normal respiration, breathing in, breathing out the CO2. So it helps maintain the electrolytes, the interstitial electrolytes and interstitial fluids in the body, and it also helps maintain your temperature. That's the purpose. Another thing there. It protects, blood protects. When the vessels are damaged, the platelets there help protect. If something foreign was to get into you, be that bacterial, viral, protozoan, fungal, it has ways of fighting those off. Your white blood cells, there's different types of white blood cells if you've been studying, and they have different functions as to what they go after: bacteria, viruses, fungus, worms, Your antibodies produced by the B cells, the plasma cells. And then the complement proteins is a series of proteins produced by the liver, which aid in the removal of invaders. Red blood cells are a biconcave disc. It's think of an inner tube with a membrane around it, and that is a biconcave disc and such. It has a type of protein in its outer membrane which allows it to bend and to move and such. It looks like that biconcave disc because it does not. An adult or a mature red blood cell does not have a nucleus. Within the cytoplasm of the red blood cell, it's mostly the protein hemoglobin. No mitochondria, so it only gets its ATP through, had to fix myself, it only gets its oxygen through anaerobic respiration, which means it does not carry on into the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, which are found in the mitochondria. It only undergoes glycolysis, boom, only gets 2 ATP for every 1 glucose. There is a ratio of red blood cells to white blood cells in a healthy individual. Once again, you can see the cell counts are different between male and female, probably due to testosterone once again. The red blood cells, they carry the oxygen. That's their main goal right there. And they also remove the CO2. CO2 is a waste. It does this with that protein hemoglobin. And the hemoglobin is a quaternary structured protein, which means it has these 4 little protein groups. And each protein group has an iron. And the iron will oxidize and reduce with oxygen. And that's how it carries the oxygen and all. And you can see the different levels there between an infant, think fetus and infant, to the adult female to the adult male. You'll notice the infant has a greater hemoglobin levels than the female because you want the oxygen to leave maternal blood and go to fetal blood. When the hemoglobin is there, it can be in a state where it is holding oxygen, or it can be in a state where it is not holding oxygen, and it can be in a state where the carbon dioxide is in place of the oxygen. All right, production of. How does the body produce red blood cells and such? And the production of red blood cells is erythropoiesis. The production of blood is hematopoiesis. So we say that there's certain tissues which are hematopoietic, bone marrow being that right there. Now, if it's going to, and that bone marrow can produce red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. If it's going to produce red blood cells, that's specifically referred to as erythropoiesis, and it requires a hormone, erythropoietin, And it's always going to start off with a stem cell, a hemocytoblast, and then that cell will differentiate into a red blood cell when it's in the presence of, or when erythropoietin is present and other key factors are present. So it'll start off as that stem cell. It'll go through a life cycle where that will become a proerythroblast, and that will then become an early basophilic erythroblast and a late polychromatophilic erythroblast. Then that will become a normoblast, and then the normoblast will kick out the nucleus. And when it kicks out the nucleus, you call it a reticulocyte because it holds on to a little bit of the endoplasmic reticulum. How long does that take from the stem cell to the reticulocyte? About 5 days. And then from the reticulocyte to mature into a erythrocyte, about 2 days. So when you think about the total, it takes about 7 days to replace blood. How long does it last? About 100 to 120 days right there. So if you take 120 days, divided by that's 4 months. So you get new blood 3 times a year. How is it removed? The spleen does a lot of that. The spleen's one of its main functions is to be a blood reservoir, but it's also to remove those old and worn out red blood cells. What if I damage my spleen? What if I don't have a spleen? The liver picks it up. The liver is a secondary site for that. What regulates the production of or the demand for red blood cells? Your kidneys do a lot of that. And it's usually decreased oxygen levels, and the kidneys key in on that. And now, why do you have reduced oxygen levels? It could be for different reasons. You've bled out, you've lost some due to some disease that's destroyed them, you're up in the high mountains, you're sick, COPD, things like that. Or you're getting healthy, you're exercising, which you should be doing. And so the kidneys pick up on that, and they will produce and release the erythropoietin, which will then go to the bone marrow and stimulate the production of red blood cells. Testosterone can be utilized to also do that, and that's, you see the increase in testosterone. The males have a little bit more and all. So you have to have iron in your body. Without the iron, your body can't make the hemoglobin. Your liver and spleen also store iron and such in there. So you do lose iron through the destruction of blood day to day. So you have to have a certain daily intake of iron in your body. Another important component to blood cell production are your B vitamins, specifically the B12 and folic acid. Those are essential for DNA production. So if you're going to have a mitotically produced cell, like red blood cells, you need these vitamins, these B vitamins, to produce the DNA to carry on mitosis. No B12, no blood cells. No folic acid, no blood cells. Something in your diet, which you drink, which will inhibit this, which will then actually cut down on your blood cell production. Disorders of your red blood cells, you can read that. You can have an anemia where you just don't have enough blood to carry the oxygen needed. And that can be due to bleeding. That could be due to a transfusion problem. That can be due to a bone marrow problem. It could be due to an iron deficiency, or it could be pernicious as there because it's a low B12. Because in your diet, your stomach produces this intrinsic factor which allows you to absorb B12, and there's a drink that you all drink that inhibits the intrinsic factors. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You have to look it up. There are genetic problems and such. You can see those right there, the thalassemia, the sickle cell anemia and such. And they can be an issue with blood cell production, blood cell shape, carrying of oxygen and such. So you can have too much, too many, too much. That's polycythemia, and you can look at the value for the hematocrit. You remember what a normal one should be. You can see that that one is almost twice as much. That could also be due to you are living up in the mountains, right, high altitude and such. Or you have an issue with your kidneys and they're releasing too much. And then people in the past, and probably continue to, they'll undergo a blood doping where they'll pull out their own blood, spin it down, store the packed red blood cells, and then transfuse it back into them so they actually have more red blood cells, more oxygen, more ATP, more energy, better athlete. We'll stop.